The floodgates have opened in the first base market, but the Mariners so far have not landed anyone. Where do they go from here? We'll answer that and more coming up here on Mailbag Monday. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Monday, December 23rd, 2024. This is Tony Gonzalez and Colby Patnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today, we'll be opening up the mailbag like we do here every Monday and answer some of your Mariners questions. But before we do that, shout out to our title sponsor today, Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB. That's LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. And if you want to hear from me and Colby even more and help support the show, check out our Patreon. All you have to do to check that out is click the link in the description of this episode. Kicking us off here on Mailbag Monday is Alex. Thoughts on the Mariners offering a one-year deal with a player option for more guaranteed money to Carlos Santana. So, like I said in the cold open, the floodgates have opened in the first base market. It started with Christian Walker going to the Astros a few days ago. Then Josh Naylor gets traded. Carlos Santana signs with the Guardians. Paul Goldschmidt signed with the Yankees. Nate Lowe got traded yesterday to the Nationals. Lots happened in the first base market. There's still some guys out there, but yeah, that market has shrunk quite a bit over the last few days, and the Mariners still do not have their guy at that spot yet. So article dropped today from Ken Rosenthal on The Athletic, detailing a lot about Santana's free agency and how his 1 year, $12 million deal with the Cleveland Guardians came to be. And it has a really interesting note in there about the Mariners, who offered Santana more guaranteed money as well as a player option for 2026. So that could mean a lot of things here. The guaranteed money specifically, like it doesn't necessarily mean, oh, they offered him $13 or $14 million for 2025 plus the player option on top of it. Could be that maybe they offered him like 10 and then the buyout for his player option in 2026, equates to a total guarantee of like $14 million, $15 million. But yeah, that is very aggressive on the Mariners front, especially for a 39-year-old first baseman. To me, that reeks a little bit of desperation. And also, I think it would mean that they have more money than what's been projected. Because, I mean, that's 80% of the projected budget that's been floated out there by, people like Adam Jude and Shannon Drayer and Daniel Kramer. So, yeah. What do you think?
Yeah. I think it's weird. Like you said, it's a lot, right? I also think I probably should call the police because clearly you've raided Miss Frizzle's house and stolen her cardigan sweater. So give me the number to the Toronto police, please. But
I believe it's 911.
That feels like that's not right. But anyways, yeah, it's a little weird that they would offer more. Now, again, the wording is more guaranteed money. So that would imply that, that to me, that says like the opt-out gets them over the 12 million, whatever the opt-out is. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's $5 million opt-out and they were going to give them 8 million this year or something like that, whatever. But I've also seen a lot of reaction similar, basically around the idea that this is an indictment on the Seattle Mariners that they couldn't even land Carlos Santana despite offering more money. And it's just like, calm down, go step outside. Like, I get it. Right. It's been slow. Like, I understand.
I mean, it's been a bit more than slow. They literally haven't done anything.
Right. It's been really frustrating. I get it.
Yeah.
Take a deep breath and step outside. Like, the Mariners have been seriously linked by people who know the organization to 2 first basemen. One of them is still out there. The other one, you had the best offer for. You made the best offer. and he chose to take less money to go home in what probably is going to be his final season. Okay, well, sorry, you didn't draft Carlos Santana 20 years ago and you couldn't land him as a result today, but those are the breaks. What do you want them to do? They offered more money than anybody. They went after a guy aggressively, and he just chose to go elsewhere, a place that he has a 10-year history with. It's not an indictment on anything. And as for, oh, they didn't get Goldschmidt. They were never in on Goldschmidt. We got one report the day before he signed that said, oh, the Mariners are kind of interested. Boy, I wonder if that was a ploy by the agent to try and juice up some business for Goldschmidt, because he signed the next day. Like Naylor, they weren't going to trade for Naylor, right? They weren't going to. The Rangers weren't going to trade low to them. So yeah, like the first base market has gone exactly how I kind of thought. Now maybe not all the pieces are going to the teams I thought they would go.
Wait, why weren't they going to trade for Naylor?
I think that the fact that he's a 1 year DH only, $12 million upfront this year probably eliminates that. Now I do wonder if they look at the price of Naylor and they're like, well, darn, we should have been more interested.
Yeah, because it's a cop round B pick and Slade Ciccone. And again, right. if you were going to give Carlos Santana somewhere around $12 million, which by the way is kind of my issue with what the Guardians wound up doing. Like, I don't know if the cop round B pick and Slade Ciccone is worth giving the same amount of money to a 39-year-old first baseman, but whatever. That we're not locked on Guardians. But yeah, if they were, planning on giving Santana 12, if not more, right?
Yeah. I think obviously, the one thing that goes into play when we talk about prospect trades, who did the Mariners have to offer? Because if the Guardians really like Ciccone, then you're not giving up a comp round B pick or a comp round A pick for 1 year of Naylor. They're not going to do that. And so it's like, do they like Hancock? I mean, I wouldn't, but he's been about as good as Ciccone, so maybe that would have worked. So yeah, maybe they could have gotten Naylor, but they didn't. Okay, move on. Maybe they didn't get Naylor because they thought they were getting Santana because A, they had the best offer, and B, it sounds like the Santana thing literally came together in hours. Like Cleveland jumped in at the last minute and sniped it from you. So I don't know. Like, did the Mariners wait around too long for an answer from Santana? Probably. That's probably the thing to be worried about here. But it's not an indictment that they couldn't get him signed. And like you said, if they were offering him more money than anybody else for a 39-year-old first base only, do they only have $16 million? Do they feel pretty good that they can clear some salary somewhere along the way? Do they have more money to spend than we thought? Like, why would they do that if it was just $16 million?
Well, because they've stated we want to add bullpen help. We want to address at least 2 of the infield spots. So
right.
If they only have $60 million, you're not doing that if you're giving Carlos Santana an upwards of $12 million.
Right. Again, unless they have some kind of, maybe it's a Castillo deal, maybe it's a Haniger deal or something, right, to help pay for Santana essentially. So yeah, to me, like, I think you could read this more, like, I would look at this as more good news than bad news. It's not any news to me though, like personally, because they didn't get a guy. Who cares? Like, move on, go get the next guy.
To me, I'm not disappointed. Like, yeah, the fact that they didn't get Carlos Santana for, $10 to $14 million plus a player option. Okay, cool. Like, kind of glad they didn't do that.
Are you significantly worse off if you go trade for Lamont Wade Jr. at his $5 million salary? No. Yandy Diaz is still out there. Justin Turner's still out there. And not for nothing, you have a first baseman on the roster who is perfectly good in Luke Raley. So you don't actually have to get a first baseman. You have to get a bat. And so I tweeted this last night. I think the Mariners' first base solution is in the outfield somewhere. Go find an outfielder, address first base that way. Give Luke Raley the job. Let Mitch Garver kind of platoon with him, blah, blah, blah. So I don't think it says anything. I don't think it's good news or bad news. It just happened. And I'm not going to read any more into it than like, oh yeah, the Mariners had the best offer out there. And personally, I'm kind of glad he didn't take it because that's a risky contract to give out. But
if they did that deal and we got on the show, we did our emergency show for that, I'd be like, I don't know about this.
It's risky.
Like
Santana, again, doesn't hit right-handed pitching that well. That's 60% of the job.
Yeah.
He's not good at it.
Yeah.
And
Again,
you're giving him 2 years?
Yeah, that feels desperate to me.
It does. But again, the Mariners have never operated out of desperation before, which is weird.
Well, and also like considering all the other options, why is that the guy that you're getting super aggressive on? Like, you get the clubhouse, what stuff and whatever. Who cares? Right? I know he's coming off of a 3-1 season, but like, again, like you said, like he mostly only hit left-handed pitching. Like he was essentially, his numbers are indicative of a weak side platoon player. Now, he wasn't that in Minnesota, but that's essentially like the value that he was bringing. Great defensively, won a Gold Glove, hit the hell out of left-handed pitching.
Mm-hmm.
Like, cool, great. There's value to that, but $12 million and he's 39 years old. I got to hope that he's going to be able to at least do that and also avoid hitting the cliff.
Yeah.
That's it's a major risk. I don't really like that deal for Cleveland. I really would not have liked that deal as reported by Ken Rosenthal today for the Mariners.
Yeah, I feel like, Mariner fans are so desperate for any kind of action. So
am I, by the way. Like, I just want something to happen.
I get it, but at the same time, like, I'm glad that the Mariners are more patient than I am. But, like, yeah, if they had given Santana a 2-year deal, basically.
That is at least paying him like 14 to 15 million bucks and potentially more. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't have loved that either. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Okay. But no, I'm not, panicked, or I don't think it says really much of anything, to be honest with you. I think we're all reading between the lines a little too much.
All right. So we're going to talk about where the Mariners go next in terms of first base in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Not only can you bet on who will win the game, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. It is Mailbag Monday. Let's get back into your questions. Ryan wants to know, do you think the Mariners will push to get a deal done quickly with Turner or just trade for Yandy Diaz? I don't know. I don't know what their next move is. I would think that Turner is probably the next guy that they turn their attention to. But I'll tell you this, that's not my preference, especially if Turner is going to command something close to, if not more than Carlos Santana, for all the reasons that we just talked about with Santana. I would rather that they trade for Yandy Diaz or Lamont Wade, frankly. Like, I would take either of those two over Turner, considering where the first base market seems to be heading. So
yeah, it seemed to have landed on a number for older first baseman, and honestly, Turner probably had the best year of all of them offensively, the most consistent, certainly. So yeah, that number seems to be $12 million. So unless the Mariners do have more money than we think they do, or they're about to trade Haniger, or they're about to trade Luis or whatever, right? They're about to open up more money. Spending $12 million on any one player is a pretty big risk because you have multiple holes on this roster. So, I think, for me, look, if they re-sign Turner, like, fine. I hope that means they have more money, or that they've somehow found a deal for a, pre-arb second or third baseman. And they're going to do that, or however they do it. I hope it means that they have more. They feel comfortable that they either have more money or they're going to have more money to spend. Like Turner's a nice fit for the ballpark. We talked about this. He's a good fit. And if he was going to make $8 million, I'd be more on board with that. But
Yeah.
If it's 12, probably not. I do think that Diaz is probably, just factoring in cost and salary and all that, Diaz is probably my favorite option that's out there right now. But Lamont Wade is certainly one of them. And again, I'll keep on pointing this out. Like, you don't actually need a first baseman. You need Victor Robles insurance. And if you get that guy, then Luke Raley can be your first baseman. And it's Raley and some combination of Garver and Dylan Moore at first base. Like, that is your first base solution. So, like, you don't actually have to have a first baseman. You have to get another bat.
Right.
And first base just happens to be the place that you have, the opening at right now. But you could also just get the bat.
And it's also the place with all the options, right?
Most of the options.
Yeah.
Not so much anymore. But yeah. So, yeah, I get why there's this hyper focus on first base. But again, ultimately, you need a bat. And if that bat happens to play the outfield, that's not a problem because you have the DH open. You can rotate all your outfielders through there. And Luke Raley is your primary first baseman. So don't zero in on just it's Turner and then there's nobody else in free agency at first base. Like, okay, well, go look in the outfield.
If they have more money to spend, if Pete Alonso's market got to a point where it's like Matt Chapman last year, right? Where would you be interested in doing that? Where it's like 360 with a pair of player options in year 2 and year 3? Because Chapman last year got 3 and 54 from the Giants.
Okay. Yeah, I would do that. If they have more money.
Because it just seems like Pete's running out of places to go at this point.
I'd be pretty shocked at this point if he's not back with the Mets.
Yeah, same.
So I think
maybe Turner goes to the Mets, right?
Sure,
or
possibly.
One of these other guys
maybe
goes to the Mets.
Get Bregman, and then they have to move Vientos to first, and then all of a sudden Alonso doesn't make a ton of sense there. So it's possible the chair stops and Seattle's kind of it, but I don't think it's going to get to that point, unfortunately.
No.
But yeah, I would do that. Sure.
Transactional Healing wants to know, assuming the Mets retain Alonso, speaking of, are the M's competing with any other teams for the potential return of Justin Turner? If not, does that drive down his asking price in any capacity? I would keep an eye on maybe the Twins. Obviously, they just lost Santana, but do they even have money to spend? Who knows? But they have an obvious need at first base. So the Twins are still a team that might be lurking. But yeah, options are limited now, but maybe the Mets now, they essentially gave up on him. So I don't know if there's any hard feelings there on Turner's part, but, and then, maybe there's a team out there like the Marlins who apparently need to just add money that, will give him a place to play pretty much every day. And, hey, we'll trade you at the deadline.
Sure. But if you're Turner and the Marlins are offering you something and the Mariners are, okay, well, one of these teams is probably going to be in the playoff hunt all year. I know that team. And if it's about, playing every day, I'm going to play pretty much every day for the Mariners. So, I can't imagine at 40 years old that Turner's going to chase the biggest contract. But we also should keep in mind that maybe he doesn't want everyday playing time. Maybe he's perfectly fine being a role player on the bench of like a World Series contender, like the Dodgers. Go back to the Dodgers and be kind of a bench guy for them. So it really is going to depend on what Turner wants. But yeah, I mean, the Mets, the Mariners, the Twins, those are kind of the big 3 right now with first base questions. And then there's always like surprises, but I imagine that, Turner's looking for a team that is going to be positioned to make a playoff run. And Seattle is one of those teams. You could also say the same about Minnesota and the Mets, of course, as well. So I do think it's those 3 teams, basically. If Turner wants like an everyday role.
We're going to answer more of your questions here in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by Gametime. So I used to live in New Mexico, and down in New Mexico, there are 0 pro sports teams, and a lot of bands and artists that I listen to skip going there more often than not. So when I moved to Toronto, where there's a baseball team, a basketball team, a hockey team, even a soccer team, and there's great music being played every night in the city, I was right in my element. When I want to catch a ball game or my wife and I want to see a band, I always get my tickets through Gametime. And that was the case well before Gametime sponsored our network and before I even joined the network, because it is truly the best ticketing service out there, hands down. I truly believe that. And now it's getting even better thanks to Gametime Picks. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I can just go on the app, it'll show me the best deal right away, it'll show me the exact view I'll have, and most importantly, it'll tell me exactly what I'm going to pay with Gametime's all-in pricing, so there are no annoying little fees that pop up at the last second. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB, that's LOCKEDONMLB, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. It is Mailbag Monday. We got a couple more of your questions to answer here. Bleer wants to know, if no significant moves are made, what do you think about adding Jose Iglesias and Ahmed Rosario to play second base and third base? Both could also fill in for JP if he struggles or gets hurt. Yeah, we talked about both of those guys on our Patreon show last week. I'd be fine with either of those guys. It does seem like it would be one or the other. It wouldn't be both, as you're kind of talking about here. And of the two, my preference would be Iglesias. He's better defensively. Plus, like, Iglesias can play like a legitimate shortstop if JP had to go down. So, yeah.
Rosario can't.
No.
Yeah, Iglesias would be my preference. I don't think getting both of them makes sense because I'm not sure if either of them are actually better than Dylan Moore. Because, Demo, while the ceiling is quite low, the floor is pretty high because of the defense and the base running and the power and the walks. So, yeah, why give Rosario $5 million when you have Dylan Moore at $3 million? So getting one of them, fine. I hope that means you did something pretty substantial at first base and DH. But yeah, like, if everything falls apart, if Iglesias is the second baseman next year, I think that's a fine starting point. And then, probably unfortunately means Dylan's the third baseman. But we'll have to wait and see. I mean, Iglesias could play third too. It doesn't really matter. But I don't think both of them makes a lot of sense for this roster. One of them absolutely could.
Last question of the day comes from Sal's. Sal's wants to know, this morning ESPN ranked Seattle second behind the Angels in their aggrieved fan index, meaning M's fans have the second greatest right to be aggrieved. Stanton is largely their reason. The team is oh so close, yet ownership refuses to do a little bit more. On the 2080 scale, how good is the ranking? I'd put Oakland ahead of them. I mean, because they literally just had their team ripped away from them. So...
Yeah, I mean, I assume that they didn't even rank the A's.
Yeah, I haven't seen this article.
Right.
So.
No. Because, of course, it's Oakland. Their team was literally robbed from them. I guess we're not counting them because they don't have a team anymore. But obviously, the fans in the Bay Area are number one by far.
Yeah.
But the Mariners are certainly top 5.
Yeah, I would probably put Colorado ahead of them. I mean, look, my only defense here, and it really isn't much of a defense, but my only defense here for the Mariners is at least they do win a fair amount of games in the regular season. I would rather have that than being a bottom of the barrel team.
I think the Rockies and the Marlins fans have more of right to be aggrieved. Yeah. Tampa Bay fans, I know that's kind of an oxymoron, but I guess they win enough that they're fine with it. But the Marlins don't win, and they don't spend. The Rockies spend, but they spend stupidly, and they don't win. So I think those, and same with the Angels. So I think those three probably ahead of Seattle, and Oakland, obviously.
Yeah.
So if you include Oakland, I would say at best Seattle should be 5th. But yeah, I mean, they're in the right range, certainly.
Yeah. So yeah, obviously it's incredibly frustrating because they're on the cusp of doing something amazing, right? Like they have one of the best pitching staffs in baseball, if not the best pitching staff in baseball. They have two superstars, Julio and Cal, and some other really nice pieces around them. Like they just need a little extra push, a little more faith put in them by ownership, and they just won't get that, right? And we're not even asking. I mean, some fans are asking for this, but
yeah,
we're not even asking for like Juan Soto, right? Just like give us, the Christian Walkers of the world or the Pete Alonsos of the world without having to, trade Luis Castillo to make room to make it happen. Right? Can you at least do that? Right? And the fact that they're not doing that, especially this offseason, all the while you're seeing the Astros better set themselves up for 2026 and beyond. The Rangers have one of the best off seasons so far in Major League Baseball. And both of those teams spent, beyond the luxury tax threshold this past year. And meanwhile, we're sitting here being like, well, I hope that they can, maybe get to like 160 million. Like that would be great.
Yeah. I mean, like they should be spending $200 million. Like,
yeah,
based on the market size, based on the money that we know they're making, based on revenue, they should be spending $200 million easy.
Yeah.
And we can't even get them to commit to 160 for a team that has, I don't know, upwards of 6 to 7 all-star players on it. Now, whether or not they make the all-star game, who cares?
No, all-star caliber players. Yeah.
Julio, Cal, the 5 starters, really. So, I mean, right there is 7. So,
Mooney, Randy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, the fact that we can't even get them to commit to, 160, 80% of what they should be spending. We have a lot of right to be aggrieved. Especially considering how close they are, because like, I don't know. Like, I would hope a lot of the frustration from Mariner fans here is simply that they look at this and they see how close they are. Like, we are not far off from being where we need to be. I would hope that's where most of the frustration comes from, and not just this place of like, same old Mariners. Like, no, the Mariners haven't been this close to being like a legitimate World Series contender for 20 years. And they've just stopped. They've stopped moving forward. And so, I do think that obviously Mariner fans have a big right to be mad right now.
Yeah. Like it's frankly, it is ridiculous that like the best free agent that we're kind of like hoping for here is Justin Turner.
Yep.
And look, we've been at the forefront of talking about how like, you don't need to spend the most money and you don't need to get X, Y, and Z on the free agent market in order to build a World Series caliber baseball team. But right now, the market is saying to you, with arguably the best farm system in baseball, or at least, a top 3 farm system in baseball, we don't want your prospects. Okay, so how do you get better? Because you don't really have the major league pieces you can part with for other major league talent where you feel that you're ultimately better at the end of the day. So you got to go out and you got to spend money. Yeah. And you're going to this market, and it seems pretty clear to me at this point, you're going to this market with, if it is actually $16 to $20 million and they don't have more than that, as we were talking about earlier on the show, you're basically going to this market with $16 to $20 million in your prospects. And that's just not what the meta is right now in the market. So you have to adjust.
Yep.
Ownership has to be willing to adjust. The front office has to be willing to adjust. Because, this is ultimately a John Stanton problem, an ownership problem. But this also does become a Jerry Dipoto and Justin Hollander problem as well.
Right. I mean, by proxy. Like the idea that Jerry and Justin are like just totally chill with being screwed over on the budget over and over again, it's not accurate. They want more money. They would love more money. Of course they would. But at some point, like ownership's not changing. So either you can get it done with these limitations or you can't. And it's unfortunate that the limitations exist, but they do. And it's unfortunate that Jerry and or Justin are going to eventually end up being the scapegoat for ownership being terrible. But that is reality, unfortunately. And the sad part of that reality is there's very little you or I or any of the fans can do about that.
Yeah. So, yeah, I would say that ranking pretty much accurate.
Yeah.
So 20/80 scale, I don't know, 65, 70. There's a couple of other teams that I'd probably put ahead of the Mariners, but they're definitely top 5 for sure.
Yeah. Definitely not falling out of the top 10.
Yeah.
But I would say probably 5.
So before we get out of here, we already posted this on Twitter, but if you missed it, our schedule is going to be a little bit different this week because of the holiday. So tomorrow we'll be doing CTZ Tuesdays, like always. We're going to be taking Wednesday off for the holiday. And then Thursday we'll do a new episode of CTZ and a new episode of Locked On. And then Fan Fiction Friday, of course, on Friday. Obviously that's subject to change if, moves are made, whatever, all that stuff.
We recorded last Christmas Eve.
Yeah. So, but that's the plan as of now. So we won't see you guys again here until Thursday. So if you celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas to you and yours. If you don't, Happy Holidays to you. And we'll get with you guys on Thursday. So that's going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode, I'm Tidy Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Tidy Gonzalez and Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. We're also on Blue Sky. You can follow me at TDG, Colby at MLB Colby, and the show at Locked On Mariners. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.